January 23, 1945, the Ardennes Forest, Belgium. 0347 hours. Sergeant Henry Matheson sat in the gunner seat of an M12 gun motor carriage, blowing warm air into his frozen hands. 28 years old, married. 2 daughters in Pennsylvania he had not seen in 17 months. He smelled gun oil and diesel. His breath turned white. In 12 minutes, he would be dead. In 6 hours, his corpse would save 127 men. The M12 was a self-propelled artillery piece built on a Sherman chassis. It mounted a 155mm howitzer designed to destroy bunkers from miles away, not fight tanks at close range. Matheson's job was aiming that gun. He was the best gunner in Battery A, 258th Field Artillery Battalion. 847 combat missions since Normandy. 847 targets destroyed. Today would be mission 848, his last. The M12 sat in a clearing 4 miles west of St. Vith. Around it, 127 American soldiers dug foxholes in frozen ground, leftovers of 3 shattered units after 2 weeks of German counterattacks. 2 infantry companies reduced to 90 men. 1 artillery battery reduced to 3 guns. Orders were simple: hold this position for 6 hours while the division withdraws, then pull back. The problem was that German forces were not 6 hours away. They were 18 minutes away. At 0359 hours, Private Eugene Kowalski heard diesel engines, heavy ones, multiple vehicles. He grabbed binoculars, saw headlights through the trees. 1, 2, 5, 8, 12. German tanks and half-tracks. He ran to Captain Daniel Rourke, told him German armor was coming. Rourke grabbed his binoculars, counted vehicles, felt his stomach drop. 12 armored vehicles, estimated 200 infantry, against 127 exhausted men and 3 artillery guns never designed for tank combat. The math was impossible. Rourke made his decision. They would fight. The M12's commander was Staff Sergeant Louis Dietrich, 34 years old, veteran of North Africa and Sicily. He knew this gun. He also knew they were about to die. The M12 had no armor. If a German tank round hit them, they would be incinerated. Dietrich looked at his crew. Matheson on the gun. Corporal James Halloran loading shells. Private First Class Anthony Rizzo handling propellant. Private Eugene Vasquez on the radio. 4 men who trusted him. Dietrich gave the order. Load high explosive. Prepare for direct fire on armor. At 0411 hours, the German tanks opened fire. A Panzer IV hit American foxholes. 3 men disappeared in the explosion. A Panther hit an ammunition truck. The blast knocked Matheson forward. Fire climbed 60 feet. Rourke screamed into his radio, "Fire the guns! Fire everything!" The 3 M12s opened fire. Matheson's gun roared first. The 155mm shell left the barrel at 1,800 feet per second. Recoil slammed the chassis backward, range 7 to 20 yards. The shell hit the Panther low, penetrated, detonated inside. The turret flew 40 feet up, crashed upside down. Matheson traversed right. Next target, Panzer IV at 680 yards. Fire, direct hit. The tank stopped, smoke pouring from every hatch. Machine gun rounds hit the M12. 1 hit Vasquez in the shoulder, spun him off the platform. He screamed, fell behind the tracks, blood soaking the snow. Dietrich grabbed the radio. Halloran kept loading. Matheson kept aiming. By 0418 hours, Matheson had destroyed 4 German tanks. The other M12s destroyed 3 more, 7 burning wrecks. The German advance stalled, but the commander was not retreating. He sent infantry forward through the trees. At 0423 hours, a Panzerfaust rocket hit the leftmost M12. The gun exploded. 6 men burned alive. Matheson saw it happen. 2 M12s left. Dietrich told Matheson to keep firing. The crew worked like machines. Load, aim, fire, repeat. Every 18 seconds, another shell. Every shell found a target. At 0429 hours, a German sniper fired from 200 yards. The bullet hit Matheson below the left collarbone, angled down, tore through his lung. He gasped, could not breathe. Blood filled his throat. He looked down, saw blood pouring from the wound, soaking his jacket. Dietrich grabbed him, tried to pull him out. Matheson shook his head. He knew he was dying, maybe 3 minutes before he lost consciousness. But if he left the gunner seat, nobody could aim this gun. He pushed Dietrich away, put both hands back on the controls, lined up the next target, a Panzer IV at 650 yards. He adjusted elevation, hands shaking, blood running down his chest. He could not breathe, could not talk. He nodded at Halloran. Fire. The gun roared. Direct hit. The tank exploded. Matheson slumped forward. His forehead hit the gun sight. His chest stopped moving. Dietrich checked his pulse. Nothing. Matheson was dead. And then Dietrich realized something terrible. The M12's 155mm gun was not balanced. It weighed 134.20 pounds on a chassis designed for a 75mm gun. Engineers added counterweights, but the system was still unstable. When the gun fired, the recoil was massive. Without proper weight distribution, accuracy would be worthless. Matheson's body, 170 pounds of dead weight, was slumped against the gun sight. His body was acting as counterbalance. If Dietrich removed the body, the gun would become unstable. They would not be able to hit tanks at 600 yards. They would not be able to stop the attack, and 127 men would die. Dietrich looked at Matheson, looked at the German tanks still coming, looked at his crew waiting for orders. His hands started shaking. He climbed into the gunner position next to Matheson, reached around the body, grabbed the traverse wheel with his left hand, past Matheson's dead arm, grabbed the elevation wheel with his right, knuckles brushing the blood-soaked chest. Matheson's head was on the sight. Dietrich had to press his face next to the corpse to see through the optic. He smelled blood, smelled death. Halloran stared. "Sir, what are you doing?" Dietrich found the next target, a Panther at 580 yards. He turned the traverse wheel. Matheson's body shifted slightly. The dead weight kept the gun steady. Fire. The gun roared. Recoil was massive, but the gun stayed stable. Matheson's body absorbed the shock. The shell hit the Panther in the turret ring, exploded inside. The Panther stopped. At 04:34 hours, the German commander saw his attack collapsing. 8 tanks burning, infantry pinned. He made a decision. Full assault. Every vehicle, every soldier. 11 tanks surged forward. Half-tracks followed. 180 infantry behind them, screaming. Rourke called for artillery support. None available. Called for air support. None available. His 127 men were alone. Dietrich kept firing. Halloran loaded shells, hands bleeding. Rizzo brought ammunition, face streaked with tears. Dietrich aimed around Matheson's body, reached past dead arms, tried not to think about the blood, the smell, using his friend as equipment. At 0441 hours, German tanks reached 400 yards. The lead Panther fired. The shell missed by 6 feet, exploded. Shrapnel tore through Rizzo's leg. He collapsed screaming, kept crawling, bringing shells. Dietrich aimed at the Panther, Matheson's body leaning against the mechanism, stabilizing everything. Fire. The shell hit the front glacis, penetrated, detonated the ammunition. The Panther exploded. A second Panzer IV destroyed the other M12. That left 1 gun. Dietrich's, Matheson's body. At 0446 hours, Dietrich had 9 shells left, 10 German tanks and 180 infantry. The math was impossible, but he kept firing. Tank at 380 yards. Fire. Hit. Tank at 420 yards. Fire. Hit. Half-track at 350 yards. Fire. Hit. At 0451 hours, 4 shells left. 6 tanks advancing. Halloran loading alone, hands shaking. Rizzo unconscious from blood loss. German infantry at 200 yards. Bullets hitting the M12 constantly. 1 hit Halloran through the hand, tore off 2 fingers. He screamed, kept loading with his right hand. Dietrich fired the third to last shell, hit a Panzer IV, immobilized it. 2 shells left, 5 tanks moving. At 0454 hours, Dietrich loaded the second to last shell, aimed at the closest Panther, 280 yards. His face inches from Matheson's corpse. Fire. The gun roared. Matheson's body shifted, but stayed in place. The shell hit, detonated. 1 shell left, 4 tanks left. Dietrich aimed at the lead tank, a Panzer IV at 240 yards. He fired the last shell. The recoil cracked the gun mount. Matheson's body lurched forward. The shell hit the turret. The tank exploded. No shells left. 3 German tanks still advancing. No way to stop them. And then the German tanks stopped. The commanders were counting. 12 tanks destroyed, 8 half-tracks destroyed, 90 infantry killed. The cost was too high. The column turned around, pulled back, disappeared. Rourke could not believe it. 127 men survived because of 1 gun, 1 crew, 1 dead gunner. Dietrich climbed out, looked at Matheson, wanted to pull him out, but the gun might be needed again. Matheson, even dead, was still part of the weapon. He left the body in the seat. At 05:20 hours, withdrawal orders came. The M12 rolled east, Matheson's corpse still in the gunner seat, head bouncing as the tracks moved. 6 hours later, they reached American lines. Dietrich filed his report. How Matheson died, how his body was left in position, how 170 pounds of dead weight saved 127 lives. Captain Rourke forwarded the report to battalion, battalion to division, division to corps. At every level, the same reaction: tactically sound, morally unthinkable. At 19:10 hours, a colonel arrived, inspected the gun, confirmed the assessment. Without the body, accuracy would have dropped 60%. He asked Dietrich one question: "Did you consider removing the body?" "Yes, sir," for about 5 seconds. "Then I realized 127 men would die." Major General Harold Thompson read the reports at 03:20 hours on January 24th, sat at his desk for 40 minutes, then wrote one sentence: "This incident will be classified. No further dissemination." Every copy of the report was collected. Every officer ordered to never speak of it. Matheson's family received notification on February 3rd. Killed in action. Died heroically. Bronze Star posthumous. The letter did not mention his body stayed in the seat for 6 hours, did not mention his corpse saved 127 men. His family never knew. The story should have died there. But 30 years later, someone found the documents. January 24th, 1945. 01:40 hours. Battalion headquarters, 12 miles east of St. Vith. Captain Daniel Rourke sat at a folding table in a freezing tent, staring at a blank field report form. His hands were shaking. The kerosene heater in the corner sputtered, filling the tent with the smell of burning fuel and smoke. He picked up his pen, put it down, picked it up again. His fingers would not stop trembling. Outside, 127 men slept in the snow, men who should have been dead, men who survived because Staff Sergeant Louis Dietrich made a decision no regulation covered, no manual anticipated, no commander wanted to read about. Rourke had written 147 after-action reports in 3 years of war. He had described men burning in tanks, drowning in rivers, screaming in aid stations. He had never struggled to write a report until now. He started writing. The pen scratched across the paper, too loud in the silent tent. At 04:11 hours, enemy armor engaged our position. 12 tanks, 200 infantry. My battery consisted of 3 M12 self-propelled guns, 127 personnel total. He stopped, crossed it out. The ink bled through the paper. He crumpled the form, threw it at the tent wall, grabbed another sheet. Started again. Sergeant Henry Matheson was killed at 04:29 hours by enemy sniper fire, chest wound, fatal within 2 minutes. He died in the gunner seat of his M12. Staff Sergeant Dietrich had a choice. Rourke stopped again. His pen was pressing so hard the tip tore through the paper. He looked at his hand, knuckles white, nails cutting into his palm. He had been to Dietrich's M12 6 hours ago, had climbed into the gunner position, had seen the blood dried black on the metal platform, had seen the shape worn into the seat cushion where a body had rested for 6 hours, had smelled it, blood and gunpowder and something else. Death. He kept writing, faster now, trying to get it out before he stopped himself. Dietrich left Matheson's body in the gunner seat. The weight of the body, approximately 170 pounds, stabilized the 155mm gun mount during sustained direct fire operations. Without this counterweight, accuracy would have been insufficient to engage armored targets at combat ranges. Dietrich operated the gun controls while working around the deceased. This action continued for 43 minutes. 8 enemy tanks destroyed, 4 half-tracks destroyed, 127 American lives saved. Rourke read it back. It sounded insane. It sounded like justification for desecration. Except it was true. He signed the report, hands still shaking, sealed it in an envelope, walked outside into air so cold it hurt his lungs, handed the envelope to a courier, watched the jeep drive into darkness, exhaust smoke hanging white in the frozen air. He went back to his tent, did not sleep. At 06:20 hours, Lieutenant Colonel Raymond Fletcher opened the envelope at battalion headquarters. He was 41 years old, West Point class of 1926, veteran of the Meuse-Argonne offensive in 1918, 19 years of peacetime Army, 3 years of this war. He thought he had seen everything the war could produce. He read Rourke's report once, then again. Then he set it down on his desk, stood up, walked to the window, looked out at nothing. His hands were clenched into fists. After 3 minutes, he walked to the field telephone, cranked the handle hard enough to hurt his wrist, demanded the duty officer at division headquarters, said he needed Major General Thompson immediately. The duty officer said the general was asleep. Fletcher said, "Wake him the hell up. This cannot wait." At 07:05 hours, Thompson arrived at his office. He was 53 years old, commander of the 106th Infantry Division, responsible for 14,000 men fighting through the worst winter Belgium had seen in 40 years. His eyes were bloodshot. He had gotten 3 hours of sleep in the last 48 hours. He smelled like stale coffee and cigarette smoke. His aide handed him Fletcher's envelope without speaking. Thompson opened it standing at his desk, read the report. His face did not change. Read it again. Still no expression. Then he sat down slowly, like his knees stopped working. He put the report on the desk, stared at it for 30 seconds, looked at his aide. "Get me Fletcher. Get me the gun crew. Get me everyone who was at that position. And get me Jag. Right now." At 10:15 hours, Thompson sat across from Dietrich in a commandeered farmhouse 8 miles behind the line. The room smelled like mold and damp wood. Dietrich was still covered in dried blood. Matheson's blood, brown and flaking on his uniform sleeves. He had not slept, had not eaten, had not changed clothes. His hands were resting on his knees, fingers twitching slightly. Thompson noticed. Thompson asked, "Why did you not remove Sergeant Matheson's body from the gun?" Dietrich answered immediately, voice flat, no emotion. "Because 127 men would have died if I did, sir." Thompson leaned forward. "Did you consider the dignity of the deceased?" Dietrich said, "Yes, sir," for about 5 seconds. Then I did the math. Without body weight counterbalancing the gun mount, accuracy drops below 50% at ranges over 400 yards. German tanks were at 600 yards when Matheson was hit. We had 41 shells total. Every round had to count. Remove the body, we miss targets, tanks keep advancing. Everyone dies. Thompson wrote notes, pen scratching loud in the quiet room. "How did you operate the gun with the body in position?" Dietrich explained, still no emotion, like reading a technical manual. "I climbed into the gunner position next to Matheson, reached around his torso to access traverse, reached past his arms for elevation. His head was on the sight. I had to look past him to acquire targets. Body shifted slightly with recoil, but stayed stable." Thompson stopped writing, looked directly at Dietrich. "How did your crew react?" Dietrich said Corporal Halloran kept loading. Did not speak. Did not look at Matheson. Not once. Private Rizzo brought ammunition until he took shrapnel to the leg. Never said a word about the body. Vasquez was unconscious. Thompson set down his pen. You understand what you did is not covered by any regulation. Yes, sir. You used a deceased soldier as a component of a weapons system. Yes, sir. Do you regret it? Dietrich looked directly at Thompson, eyes flat, voice steady. No, sir. Matheson saved 127 men, even dead. That matters more than anything. Thompson dismissed him, told him, get food, get sleep, do not discuss this with anyone. Dietrich stood, walked to the door, stopped. Sir, can I ask something? Thompson said, what? Dietrich said, did I do the right thing? Thompson did not answer for a long time, then said, I do not know. Get out. Dietrich left. Thompson sat alone in the farmhouse for 20 minutes. The room was silent. He could hear his own breathing. Finally, he picked up the phone, called his legal officer. At 13:40 hours, Captain Morris Feinberg from the Judge Advocate General Office arrived. He was 29 years old, lawyer from Boston, Harvard Law, 1940, assigned to division to handle courts-martial. Thompson handed him the report, told him read it. Feinberg read it, looked at Thompson. Jesus Christ, this cannot be real. It is. Feinberg read it again, slower. This is the most disturbing thing I have read in 3 years of war. I need to know if Dietrich violated military law. Feinberg spent 2 hours reviewing regulations, the Uniform Code of Military Justice, Army Doctrine. At 15:40 hours, he returned. Said there is no law that covers this, no regulation, no precedent. Closest is desecration under Article 87, but that requires malicious intent. Dietrich's intent was tactical necessity. Court-martial would probably acquit. Thompson said, what happens if this becomes public? Feinberg said, it destroys us. Soldiers think the Army views them as equipment, expendable after death. Families are horrified. Press calls it barbaric. Does not matter that Dietrich was right. Does not matter that 127 men lived. The optics are catastrophic. What do? Classify it. Restrict access. If this reaches Congress or the press, it becomes a scandal that undermines the war effort. Thompson made his decision at 16:20 hours, stamped the report secret, ordered every copy collected, ordered Fletcher, Rourke, Dietrich, and the crew to never discuss it outside official channels. Violation means court-martial. He wrote a sanitized summary for Corps headquarters, described the engagement, commended Dietrich for leadership, recommended Bronze Star for Matheson, did not mention the body. Thompson sealed both documents, sent them up the chain, sat back in his chair, rubbed his face with both hands. He could still smell the farmhouse, the mold, the damp. Could still see Dietrich's flat eyes when he said, no, sir, I do not regret it. At 22:30 hours, Thompson walked to the Graves registration tent. It was colder than before, wind cutting through the canvas walls. He found the sergeant in charge, asked where Sergeant Henry Matheson's body was located. The sergeant pointed to a canvas bag on a wooden pallet in the corner. Thompson walked over, stood next to it for a long time. His breath came out white in the frozen air. He reached for the zipper on the bag. His hand stopped 3 inches away. Froze there. He wanted to see Matheson's face, wanted to see the man who became a piece of equipment, wanted to understand what 170 pounds of dead weight looked like. But he could not do it, could not open the bag. Because if he saw the face, saw the wound, saw what was left, he would have to imagine that face resting against a gun sight for 6 hours while another man fired around it. Thompson pulled his hand back, looked at the bag for another minute, then walked out of the tent without saying anything. He went to his quarters, lay on his cot fully dressed, stared at the ceiling, did not sleep. On February 3rd, Mary Matheson received a telegram in Scranton, Pennsylvania. The paper was thin, words typed in black ink. The telegram said her husband Henry was killed in action January 23rd, performing his duties with exceptional valor, defending fellow soldiers. Awarded Bronze Star posthumous, body to be returned when logistics permit. The telegram did not say how he died, did not say his body stayed in a gun seat, did not say his corpse saved 127 men, did not say the Army buried the truth because it was too horrible to explain. Mary cried for 3 days, put the telegram in a box with Henry's letters, told her daughters their father was a hero, never knew what hero meant. Dietrich, Halloran, Rizzo, Vasquez returned to duty. Never spoke about January 23rd, not to each other, not to anyone. Orders. But silence ate them. Halloran started drinking, hands shaking whenever he loaded shells. Rizzo stopped sleeping, saw Matheson's face every time he closed his eyes. Vasquez requested transfer to another unit, got denied, started taking extra guard shifts so he never had to be near the M12. Dietrich kept commanding, but never sat in the gunner seat again. In March, the M12 went to a maintenance depot. Mechanics cleaned the gunner position, scrubbed 6 hours of dried blood off metal and canvas, repaired the gun mount, returned it to service. The M12 fought 17 more engagements before Germany surrendered in May. No one mentioned Matheson. The gun kept firing. The war moved on. The story stayed buried in classified files, stamped secret, locked in a vault at division headquarters, forgotten. For 30 years, the truth stayed hidden, until one person broke the rules. For 30 years, 127 men kept a secret, not because they were ordered to, they were, but they kept it because they were ashamed. Ashamed that they survived, ashamed of how they survived, ashamed that a dead man saved them. The secret stayed buried until August 12, 1975. National Archives, College Park, Maryland. 0940 hours. David Greenberg sat in a windowless research room surrounded by cardboard boxes labeled 106th Infantry Division After Action Reports, 1944 to 1945. He was 31 years old, freelance journalist, working on a book about forgotten battles of the Bulge. He had been reading field reports for 6 hours straight. His eyes burned, his back ached. The room smelled like dust and decades-old paper and stale air conditioning. He opened Box 47, pulled out a manila folder marked Secret Declassified per Standard, 30-Year Protocol, June 1975. Inside was Captain Daniel Rourke's after-action report from January 24, 1945. Greenberg started reading, got 3 paragraphs in, stopped, read it again, said out loud, "What the hell is this?" An archivist 20 feet away looked up, annoyed. Greenberg ignored him. Sergeant Henry Matheson killed 0429 hours sniper fire, body left in gunner seat to stabilize 105 mm gun mount. 170 pounds dead weight, maintained counterbalance during sustained direct fire. Staff Sergeant Dietrich operated weapon controls around deceased for 43 minutes. 8 enemy tanks destroyed. 127 American lives saved. Greenberg read the report 4 times, pulled out a notepad, started writing names in capital letters. Rourke, Dietrich, Matheson, Halloran, Rizzo, Vasquez. Underlined each one twice. Walked to the archives front desk, asked how to request declassified personnel files. The clerk said, "Fill out Form SF-180, wait 6 to 8 weeks. Greenberg filled out 7 forms that afternoon. He did not wait 6 weeks. He started calling veterans organizations that night. On September 3, 1975, Greenberg found Daniel Rourke in Pittsburgh. 58 years old, accountant, married, 3 kids, had not thought about the war in years. Greenberg called him at home after dinner. Said, "My name is David Greenberg. I am researching the Battle of the Bulge. I found your after-action report from January 23, 1945. I need to ask about Staff Sergeant Dietrich and Sergeant Matheson." Silence on the line for 10 seconds. Then Rourke said, "I cannot talk about that." Greenberg said the report was declassified. Rourke said, "I do not care what it was. I was ordered never to discuss it." Greenberg said that order was 30 years ago. The war is over. People deserve to know. Rourke said, "No. No, they do not. You have no idea what you are asking." Then he hung up. Greenberg called back 6 times that week. Rourke never answered. On September 9th, Greenberg found James Halloran in Cleveland. 54 years old, worked at a steel mill, divorced, lived alone in a third-floor walk-up that smelled like cigarettes and old food and something sour Greenberg could not identify. Greenberg showed up unannounced, knocked on the door. Halloran opened it, saw a stranger with a notepad, tried to close the door. Greenberg said, "I know what happened January 23, 1945. I know about Matheson. I know about the gun." Halloran stopped, hand frozen on the doorknob, stared at Greenberg. His hand started shaking. He said, "Get the hell out of here." Greenberg did not move. Said, "I read Rourke's report. I know Dietrich left Matheson's body in the seat. I know you loaded shells while working around a corpse for 43 minutes. I know the Army classified it." Halloran said, "You do not know anything." Greenberg said, "Then tell me what I got wrong." Halloran looked at him for a long time. His hands were still shaking. Then he stepped aside, let Greenberg into the apartment, did not offer him a chair, sat on a couch that had stuffing coming out of the armrests, springs poking through torn fabric, lit a cigarette, said, "What do you want?" Greenberg said, "I want the truth." What really happened? Halloran took a long drag, ash falling onto his lap. Said the report told you what happened. The report gave me facts, numbers, tactics. I want to know what it was like, what you saw, what you felt. Halloran said you cannot write about this. Greenberg asked why not. Halloran said, because people will not understand. They will think we were monsters. Greenberg said, "Were you?" Halloran looked at him, eyes hard, cigarette burning between his fingers. Said we saved 127 men. Matheson saved 127 men. That is all that matters. What was it like, loading shells with his body 3 feet away? Halloran took another drag. Ash fell. He did not brush it away. Said I did not look at him, not once. I kept my eyes on the shells, on my hands, on the breech, on anything except him. But I heard him. Every time the gun fired, his body shifted, made a sound, dead weight moving against metal. I heard it for 43 minutes. I still hear it. He closed his eyes, shook his head slowly, side to side, like he was trying to shake something loose from inside his skull. Opened his eyes. They were wet. Greenberg wrote everything down, asked, "Where is Dietrich now?" Halloran said, "I do not know. Have not spoken to him since March 1945. Greenberg asked, "Why not?" Halloran said, "Because every time I think about him, I see Matheson, and I cannot do that anymore. I spent 30 years trying not to see it. You are making me see it again." Greenberg left an hour later with 11 pages of notes. On September 17th, Greenberg found Louis Dietrich in Dayton, Ohio. 64 years old, owned a small auto repair shop, married, 3 kids, 7 grandchildren. Greenberg walked into the shop at 1400 hours. Dietrich was under a Chevy pickup, grease on his hands and face, and coveralls. Greenberg said, "Are you Staff Sergeant Louis Dietrich, 258th Field Artillery Battalion?" Dietrich slid out from under the truck, looked at Greenberg, said, "I have not been called that in 30 years. What do you want?" "I want to know about January 23, 1945. Dietrich's face went blank. He stood up slowly, wiped his hands on a rag that was already black with grease. Said, "I cannot talk about that." Greenberg said, "You can. It is declassified." Dietrich said, "I do not care." Greenberg said 127 men survived because of what you did. Their families deserve to know. Dietrich said, "No, they do not. Because if they know, they will ask questions. They will want details. They will want to understand. And I cannot explain it in a way that makes sense to people who were not there. What I did was right. It saved lives. But it was also wrong, and I have lived with that for 30 years. I am not going to make other people live with it. What if I write about it anyway?" Dietrich looked at him for a long time, then said, "If you do, get it right. Do not make Matheson sound like equipment. Do not make me sound like a hero. Tell the truth. He died aiming that gun. Then his body kept 127 men alive for 43 more minutes. That is what happened. That is what matters. Greenberg wrote a 4,000-word article, titled it "The Gunner Who Kept Fighting After Death," sent it to 11 magazines and newspapers. 10 rejected it immediately. Too disturbing, too controversial. One editor wrote this story makes the Army look like it treats soldiers as disposable parts. We cannot publish this. The 11th publication was Wartime Quarterly, a small military history journal. Circulation 3,000 subscribers. Editor was retired Army Colonel Bernard Walsh. He read the article, called Greenberg, said, "This is the most important story I have read in 10 years. We publish it. December 1975 issue. 3,000 people read it. Then someone sent a copy to the Washington Post. Reporter named Ellen Travis read it, called Greenberg, said, 'I want to follow up.' Greenberg said, 'Go ahead.' Travis dug deeper. Found Thompson's memo. Found Feinberg's legal analysis. Found the classification order. Wrote a 2,500-word article, titled it, 'Army Covered Up Use of Dead Soldier as Weapon Component.' Published February 8, 1976 on the front page. 48 million people read it. The backlash was immediate and divided. Veterans groups called it a smear. Families called it exploitation. Anti-war activists called it proof soldiers are expendable. Congressmen demanded hearings. Secretary of the Army issued a statement. Staff Sergeant Dietrich's decision was within bounds of tactical necessity. No misconduct occurred. Mary Matheson was 67 years old, living in Scranton, same house she had lived in since 1942. She read the Washington Post article on February 9th at her kitchen table. Her daughter Susan brought it over, said, "Mom, you need to see this." Mary put on her reading glasses, started reading. She got to the part that said body left in gunner seat to stabilize gun mount. Her hands started shaking. The newspaper rattled. She kept reading. Got to 170 pounds dead weight. Her hands shook harder. She reached for her coffee cup. Could not pick it up. Her fingers would not grip. Susan grabbed her hand. "Mom, are you okay?" Mary did not answer. Kept reading. Read how Dietrich operated controls around the corpse. Read how the body shifted with each recoil. Read how 127 men survived. She finished the article, set the newspaper down slowly, stared at it, did not speak. Susan said, "Mom, did you know?" Mary said, "No, I never knew. They told me he died heroically. They never said how. They never said what they did with him after." She sat at that table for 3 hours, did not move, did not eat, just stared at the article. Susan stayed with her, did not know what to say. Finally, Mary stood up, walked to the living room, opened a drawer in an old desk, pulled out a cardboard box. Inside were letters from Henry, photos from before the war, his Bronze Star citation, and one photo she had not looked at in years. A black and white photo of Henry's gun crew, 5 men standing next to an M12. Henry in the gunner seat, smiling. 4 other men around him. On the back, written in pencil, names: Matheson, Dietrich, Halloran, Rizzo, Vasquez, January 1945. Mary stared at the photo, at Dietrich standing next to her husband, the man who used Henry's body, the man who saved 127 lives. She did not know if she should hate him or thank him. She sat on the couch holding the photo, crying. Susan sat next to her, arm around her shoulders. Mary said he saved them. Henry saved them, even after he was gone. On February 12th, Mary Matheson called a lawyer, filed a lawsuit against the Department of Defense for withholding information about her husband's death. The case was dismissed in April. Judge ruled the Army had no legal obligation to disclose tactical details to families. On March 4th, CBS News aired a 15-minute segment, interviewed Greenberg, Travis, Halloran, 3 of the 127 survivors. Former Private Eugene Kowalski, 56 years old, said on camera, "I did not know why we survived until I read that article. Now I know. Matheson saved us twice. Once when he aimed before he died. Once when his body kept the gun working after. I owe him my life." The segment ended with a question. Was Dietrich right? The anchor did not answer. Left it to the viewers. On April 1, 1976, the Army announced Sergeant Henry Matheson would be posthumously awarded the Silver Star. Citation read displayed extraordinary heroism by engaging enemy forces while mortally wounded, directly contributing to survival of 127 soldiers. The citation did not mention the 6 hours after his heart stopped. Mary Matheson refused to accept the medal, sent a letter to the Secretary of the Army. "If you want to honor my husband, tell the whole truth. Do not sanitize it. Henry saved those men. His body saved those men. Say it." The Army did not say it. Louis Dietrich gave one interview in April 1976 to Greenberg, asked if he regretted his decision. Dietrich said no. "I regret that I had to make it, but I do not regret what I did." Asked if he would do it again. Dietrich said yes, every time. 127 men go home. Matheson would have wanted that. The story faded from headlines by June 1976, moved to other scandals, other wars. But the question never faded. Was Dietrich right? Was the Army right to classify it? Was Matheson a hero or a victim? Louis Dietrich died in 1989 at age 78. Heart attack in his auto shop. His obituary mentioned his service in World War II. Did not mention January 23, 1945. Did not mention the decision that defined him. He was buried with full military honors in Dayton National Cemetery. Henry Matheson is buried in Arlington National Cemetery, Section 34, grave 1847. His headstone reads, Sergeant Henry J. Matheson, 258th Field Artillery Battalion, killed in action. 23, January 1945, Bronze Star, Silver Star. Nothing about how he died, nothing about the 6 hours his body spent saving lives. The truth is buried with him. James Halloran died in 1998. Liver failure, alone in the same Cleveland apartment. No military funeral, no ceremony. In his belongings, police found a faded photo of an M12 gun crew. 5 men. On the back, one name circled in pen. Matheson. The question was never answered. Hero or victim? Right or wrong? The 127 men who survived are almost all gone now. Most died without ever speaking about what really happened. The ones who did speak said the same thing. We lived because of Matheson. That is all that matters. But it was not all that mattered, because 30 years of silence left scars deeper than any wound, and some truths, once buried, can never be fully exhumed. May 1976. 3 months after the story broke, the question was still everywhere. Was Dietrich right? Was Matheson a hero or a victim? Talk shows debated it. Newspapers ran editorials. College philosophy classes used it as ethics case studies. Everyone had an opinion, almost no one had an answer, except the men who were there. Eugene Kowalski was 56 years old in 1976, living in Milwaukee, worked as a machinist, married 32 years, 4 kids, 9 grandchildren. He had been the soldier who first spotted the German tanks on January 23, 1945, had run to warn Captain Rourke, had fought for 43 minutes while Matheson's body stabilized the gun 60 yards away. In April 1976, a local TV station asked to interview him. He said yes. The interview aired May 3rd. The reporter asked the question everyone was asking. Was Staff Sergeant Dietrich right to leave Sergeant Matheson's body in the gun? Kowalski looked directly at the camera. Said, I am alive because Dietrich made that choice. My wife is not a widow because Dietrich made that choice. My 4 children have a father because Dietrich made that choice. My 9 grandchildren know their grandfather because Dietrich made that choice. You want to know if he was right? Ask my family, the reporter asked. But what about Matheson's dignity? What about his family? Kowalski said Matheson was my friend. We trained together, we fought together. I knew him for 8 months before he died. And I know this. He would have made the same choice Dietrich did. because that is who he was. He was a soldier. He understood the mission, save lives. That is what he did. That is what his body did after he was gone. The reporter asked, "Do you ever think about that day?" Kowalski said, "Every single day for 31 years. I think about the sound of the gun firing. I think about Matheson aiming before he died. I think about how close we came to being overrun. And I think about the fact that I got to go home, and he did not." The interview ended. Cameras turned off. The crew started packing equipment. Kowalski sat there, still wired with the microphone. The reporter was about to disconnect him when Kowalski spoke again, quieter, not looking at anyone. "Said you want the truth? The truth I tell my family is that I am alive because of Matheson. But the truth I do not tell them is that I wish it was me in that seat, not him. I have spent 31 years wishing it was me." The reporter did not know what to say. Kowalski unclipped the microphone himself, walked to his car, sat in the parking lot for 20 minutes before he could drive. His hands were shaking. Anthony Rizzo was 50 years old in 1976, living in Newark, never married, worked night shifts at a warehouse, lived alone in a studio apartment on the 4th floor of a building that smelled like mildew and garbage. He had been the youngest member of Dietrich's gun crew, 19 years old on January 23, 1945, had brought ammunition to the M12 while Matheson's body sat in the gunner seat, had taken shrapnel to the leg, had kept crawling, kept bringing shells, bleeding, half-conscious. In May 1976, a reporter from the Newark Star-Ledger found him, knocked on his apartment door at 1900 hours. Rizzo opened the door, saw the notebook, said, "I am not talking." The reporter said, "I just want to know how you are doing." Rizzo said, "I am doing fine. Now leave." The reporter said, "Did you know Matheson well?" Rizzo stopped, hand on the door, said, "Yes, I knew him." The reporter asked, "What was he like?" Rizzo said he was the best gunner in the battalion, never missed, never complained, took care of his crew. The reporter asked, "Do you think he would have wanted his body used the way it was?" Rizzo was quiet for a long time, then said, "I do not know. I was 19. I did not understand anything. I just did what I was told. Load shells, bring ammunition, do not look at Matheson. I followed orders. I survived. Matheson did not. That is all I know." The reporter asked, "Do you have nightmares?" Rizzo looked at him, said, "Every night for 31 years, every single night. I see his face, I see the blood. I hear the sound his body made when the gun fired. I wake up and I am still there. I never left that clearing. Part of me is still there, will always be there." He closed the door, did not say anything else. The reporter stood in the hallway for a minute, then left. The article never ran. Editor said it was too depressing. Rizzo died alone in that apartment in 2003. Heart attack. Landlord found him 3 days later. No family, no friends. Police entered to process the scene, found his body on the floor next to the bed. In his right hand, clenched tight, was a piece of paper. An officer pried it from his fingers. On the paper, written in pencil, was one name, Matheson. Written, then crossed out. Written again, crossed out again. 47 times. The paper was covered. Matheson, 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 over and over, each one scratched through with hard lines that tore the paper. The police report listed it as personal effects. No one asked what it meant. The paper was thrown away. But the apartment told a different story. When the landlord cleaned it out to rent again, he found the bedroom wall covered in pencil marks. Words scratched into the paint, hundreds of times, covering the entire wall from floor to ceiling. "I am sorry, Matheson. I am sorry, Matheson. I am sorry, Matheson." Written so many times the words overlapped, became illegible, turned into texture. The landlord painted over it, never told anyone. Daniel Rourke never spoke publicly, refused every interview. In June 1976, a reporter showed up at his accounting office in Pittsburgh, waited in the lobby for 3 hours. When Rourke came out, the reporter asked one question: "Do you regret writing that report?" Rourke stopped, looked at the reporter, said every day, "I regret writing it. I regret what happened. I regret surviving. I regret everything except one thing." 127 men went home. That is the only thing that matters. Now leave me alone. He walked away, never spoke about it again, died in 2001. His obituary mentioned his service in World War II, did not mention January 23, 1945. His family found the original handwritten draft of his after-action report in a locked drawer in his desk. He had kept it for 56 years. The paper was yellowed, fragile, covered in ink stains where he had crossed out words and rewritten them. At the bottom, in small handwriting, a note he had written to himself in 1945. "If this is wrong, I do not want to know what right looks like." Mary Matheson spent the rest of her life fighting the Army to change Henry's headstone. She wanted it to say, "Sergeant Henry J. Matheson saved 127 soldiers, died January 23, 1945, body used to stabilize artillery gun for 6 hours after death, awarded Silver Star for continued service beyond life." The Army refused, said headstones follow standard format, no exceptions. Mary appealed, rejected, appealed again, rejected. She wrote letters to senators, congressmen, the Secretary of Defense. All rejected. In 1982, she commissioned a private memorial stone, placed it next to Henry's grave at Arlington. The stone read here lies a man who saved lives twice, once while dying, once after death. Henry Matheson, hero in life and beyond. The Army removed the stone in 1983. Unauthorized memorials not permitted. Mary replaced it. The Army removed it again. Mary replaced it a third time. The Army threatened legal action. Mary stopped. She died in 1991 at age 83. Her last words to her daughter Susan were, "Make sure they remember what he did." All of it, not just the pretty parts. Susan promised. In 2015, Susan Matheson, 72 years old, published a book titled The Gunner Who Could Not Rest. The book included Rourke's full report, Dietrich's interview, Halloran's testimony, photos of the M12, photos of Henry before he died. One chapter titled The Question That Will Never Be Answered ended with this: "My father saved 127 men. Then his body saved them again." Was that heroic? Was that horrific? I do not know. I will never know. What I do know is that 127 families got their sons, husbands, fathers, brothers back. And my family did not. That is the cost of war. Someone always pays. My father paid twice. In 2018, the Department of Defense issued a statement. In recognition of extraordinary circumstances surrounding Sergeant Henry Matheson's service on January 23, 1945, and acknowledging ethical complexities of decisions made under combat conditions, the Army posthumously awards Sergeant Matheson the Distinguished Service Cross. This award honors both his actions before death and the unintended but critical role his remains played in saving 127 American soldiers. Mary Matheson had been dead for 27 years. She never saw it. The medal was presented to Susan at a ceremony in Arlington. She accepted it, held it, looked at the inscription. Then she walked to her father's grave, knelt, placed the medal on the headstone, said, "You deserved this 73 years ago. I am sorry it took so long." She stood, walked away, left the medal there. 3 days later, Susan returned to the grave. The medal was gone. Stolen. But on the headstone, held down by a small rock, was a folded piece of paper. Susan opened it. Inside, handwritten in shaky letters, it said, "He saved my grandfather, January 23, 1945. Thank you." No signature, no name, just those words. Susan sat on the ground next to the grave, held the note, started crying, did not know who wrote it, did not need to know. One of the 127 had found the medal. had taken it, had left gratitude instead. The Army issued a replacement medal. Susan never picked it up. The question is still asked. Was Dietrich right? The answer depends on who you ask. Veterans say yes, survival justifies anything. Ethicists say no, the dead deserve dignity. Families of the 127 say yes, their loved ones came home. Matheson's family says we do not know, and neither does anyone else. In 2020, the last known survivor of the 127 men died. Robert Kellerman, 96 years old, former corporal, had been 21 on January 23, 1945. Before he died, a hospice nurse asked if he had regrets. He said yes. 1. I lived, and Matheson did not. That is my regret. The nurse asked if Dietrich made the right choice. Kellerman said it does not matter if it was right, it was necessary. And sometimes in war, necessary and right are not the same thing. He died 6 hours later. The M12 gun motor carriage that Matheson died in, that his body stabilized for 43 minutes, that saved 127 lives, was scrapped in 1946, cut apart for metal, melted down, turned into something else. No record of what, no memorial, no plaque. It simply disappeared. But the story did not disappear. It is taught in military ethics courses at West Point, debated in philosophy classes, studied by commanders trying to understand impossible decisions, and remembered by families of the 127 men who lived. January 23, 1945, a gunner died at his post. His body kept fighting. 127 men went home, and 80 years later, no one can agree if that was heroism or horror. Maybe it was both. Maybe war does not allow for clean answers. Maybe the only truth is this: Matheson saved lives. Dietrich made a choice no one should ever have to make. 127 families were spared grief. One family carried it forever, and the question, right or wrong, will never be fully answered, because the only person who could answer it has been silent for 80 years. But 127 families heard his answer. They went home.